All right, let's get right into it. We talk a lot about the keys to success, right? But what if the real secret isn't finding the keys, but understanding the locks? Today, we're diving into a fascinating way to find that one thing that you absolutely positively cannot succeed without. This is all about uncovering the hidden rules of the game. And I mean, isn't this one of the most maddening feelings in the world? You follow all the advice, you check every single box, you pour in the time and the money, and you still don't get the result you want. It feels like you're missing something obvious, but your usual analysis just doesn't show you what it is. So, what is going on? Well, the answer might be that we've been using the wrong kind of logic. See, most of the time we use what's called sufficiency logic. It's all about finding things that are correlated with success. You know, the things that help on average. These are your should-haves. But what if we just flipped that whole idea on its head? What if we started looking for the must-haves? The things that are absolutely required for success to even be possible. And that, right there, is the core idea behind a technique called necessary condition analysis, or NCA. It asks a totally different question. It doesn't care what causes success. Instead, it asks, before we can even begin, what are the non-negotiable prerequisites that have to be in place? A necessary condition is basically a deal breaker. Think of it like a gatekeeper for your goal. If you don't have it, the outcome you're chasing is impossible. Not just, a long shot, literally impossible. Some of these are super obvious, right? A car is not going to run without fuel. A key is necessary to unlock a door. Simple. But what's so cool is this logic applies to really complex stuff too. Research has shown that for luxury hotels to collaborate effectively, they must have a certain level of what's called relational capability. And in psychology, we know that for someone to have genuine intrinsic motivation, a feeling of autonomy is a must-have ingredient. And here's the kicker. You can't make up for a missing must-have. You can't compensate for it. You could have the most amazing, tricked-out sports car in the world, but if the gas tank is empty, you are going nowhere. It doesn't matter how great everything else is. Okay, so if these things are so critical, how in the world do we find them? This is where things get really visual, because this method lets us see our data in a way that's completely new. So you've probably seen a chart like this a million times. It's a scatter plot. Normally, we'd try to draw a line right through the middle of that cloud of dots to find the average trend. But here's the question. What if the most important story isn't in the cloud itself? Exactly. With necessary condition analysis, we ignore the middle of the cloud. We are laser-focused on the edges, specifically that empty space in the top left corner. We draw a line called a ceiling line right over the top of all the data points. This line is a barrier. It separates what's possible from what's impossible. And this phrase says it all. That line is the absolute limit. The area above it is empty for a very important reason. The outcome just cannot exist up there because the necessary factor on the bottom isn't high enough. That line is the frontier of what you can achieve. And this isn't just a pretty picture. We can actually measure it. The effect size, which they call D, is basically a number that tells you how big that empty space is. The bigger D is, the more that condition is acting as a major bottleneck, putting a hard limit on your outcome. So you might be asking, how big is big? Well, researchers have set up some handy benchmarks. An effect size of 0.3 or more is considered large. That's your signal that you found a really meaningful bottleneck, something that's seriously holding you back. Okay, this is all fascinating stuff, but how does it actually help anyone? How does a manager or a student or a founder take this ceiling line and turn it into a smart decision? This is where the magic happens. It's called a bottleneck table. And it's basically a cheat sheet that translates that chart into a plain English action plan. On the left, you pick the goal you're aiming for, and on the right, it tells you the absolute minimum level of the key ingredient you must have to even stand a chance. So let's make that real. Look at this table. If you're saying we need to hit 80% of our performance goal, this analysis gives you a crystal clear answer. Your vision score absolutely must be at least 2.15. Not 2.1, not 2.14. If you're below that number, you can forget about hitting that 80% goal. It gives you a hard, non-negotiable target. And this isn't just a theory. This tool is being used right now across all sorts of fields to find these mission-critical factors that everyone else was missing. Let's look at a few quick examples of how high the stakes can be. First up, getting people to actually use a new piece of tech. This is a massive headache for so many companies. They spend a fortune on development, and then crickets. A study looked at adoption for a new business tool and found 3 non-negotiables. For people to really adopt it, they had to believe it would help them do their job better, that it was easy to use, and that it was at least a little bit enjoyable. If you failed on even one of those 3 must-haves, your adoption rates were guaranteed to be low, no matter how many other cool features you packed in. All right, let's switch gears to something huge: supply chains. We're talking about systems where one single mistake can cost a company millions and bring operations to a grinding halt. So what's absolutely necessary for a supply chain that won't break under pressure? Research using this method points to 2 things. You must have clear visibility across the whole chain, and you must have a genuinely collaborative culture. A company could spend a fortune on warehouses and trucks, but if those 2 things aren't in place, the system is brittle. It will snap when things get tough. What's really wild is that this logic can even give us clear answers to some really deep human questions that have been debated for years in psychology and education. Check this out. Are emotions a prerequisite for making ethical choices? Analysis says, yep. Is there a minimum IQ needed to be highly creative? NCA can actually find that threshold. Is a high level of stress a must-have for an entrepreneur to burn out? This is the tool that can test that claim directly. It cuts right through the noise. So when you boil it all down, the takeaway is massive. If you're only focusing on the should-haves, the things that help on average, while completely ignoring the must-have bottlenecks, you're not just taking a risk. You are actively planning to fail. You simply can't excel your way out of a missing prerequisite. And that really brings us to the final thought, one for you to take with you. This isn't just about data and charts. It's a whole new lens to look at your own work, your own team, your own goals. So the real question is, what's the hidden bottleneck? The one non-negotiable must-have that's setting the ceiling on your success?